Kia ora everyone, and welcome to CWLive. We're here once again, as we are every Wednesday, to talk through different things about being an artist and how we can work as arts organisations and as arts professionals in the Waikato and online and in various other formats, trying to support you doing your mahi. Today, what we're going to be talking about is some quick tips on making videos. What we've seen is this move online through the lockdown, and while things are loosening up and we're moving into level 2 and working out what that means for different arts organisations, still the need to make compelling videos are a great way to engage with your audience, to communicate ideas, but also to develop new techniques for sharing your work online, whether that's through running tutorials or doing live streams or making promotional videos, or just as a way of kind of telling stories about your artwork. So as always, I'm joined by Paul Bradley from Creative Waikato, and today our special guest is Dawn Tuffery from Nimbus Media. So, making videos. What are some key things for us to think about when we want to think about getting started in this?
I think.
Sorry, you go, Dawn.
Cool, Dawn Tuffery. I'm Dawn from Nimbus Media. I think we always think about the concept. What do you want people to take away from it? What do you want them to know? What are you communicating? Is that what you're looking at as well, Paul?
Yeah. Definitely, like starting with an overall intention seems like a great place to start. what I was gonna say is what my partner just shared with me actually is that starting with a view of it as a creative project, as you would one of your other creative projects, helps to kind of frame that, I think.
One thing I did forget to say in the beginning there was, if you do have any questions for Dawn, or any general questions around making video, please do throw them in the comments and we'll answer them as they come up. So when we're starting making video, how do you approach kind of thinking about that concept, about that story that you want to tell, Dawn?
I think I always try and come from a place of authenticity. Like, is it you? Is it real? And what's sort of hooking people into it? Why do they want to know this? Why is it useful or fun for them to watch it? And I think fun is something we always keep in mind at Nimbus as well, like making the process fun and making the output fun.
Have you got any good tips for being finding that authentic voice? Because that's something you hear talked about a lot in terms of social media and things like that, and definitely that's my experience when I'm watching YouTube videos or Facebook videos, etc. Sometimes you can sort of see that someone's trying to be something for the camera, and I find in my own experience it's hard not to fall into that trap. Like, it's very hard, I think, for a lot of us to be natural in a medium that we are actually making. You got any tips for how to kind of be, I guess, find out what's the sort of that authentic message that you're talking about, but also how to be more yourself when you've got a camera pointed at you?
I think that's a really good question. I still don't necessarily know the answer for myself. I like being behind a camera.
Yeah.
I like drawing pictures of what my authentic thoughts are rather than talking about them on camera, potentially. But I think taking time, because you can always edit it down later, and good old brainstorming. Like, what are you wanting to say? What is real to your life or your creative project? And just sort of showing how it all comes together. I don't know if there's a magic thing to get there.
That makes sense.
So we've had one question, which is there a certain length that is the sweet, impactful length? And I mean, I guess that we may need a little bit more clarity as to there may be different perfect lengths for different formats as well. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I definitely think short is better, especially in our current environment. We do try and keep under 90 seconds for engaging content, although obviously if you're getting into depth and wanting to know more about the process of the project, then it's fine to stretch it out. But I think thinking about the context, like, is this a fun, touching base thing where it's going to be 20 seconds? Or is it trying to tell a little bit of a story about where you've come from, what the process has been, and where you've got to, in which case you might look more 60 to 90 seconds.
It's such a weird reflection of the world that we live in when 60 to 90 seconds is the long version. I guess like one of the things I think that really helps about making videos shorter is it forces people to really edit down to what the most important messages are.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I think it depends on also where you're going to be showing the video. If it's for social media, if it's for Instagram, for instance, I think the maximum is 60 seconds for it to be in a post, unless if it's in that IGTV.
Yeah.
So if you're designing something that's going to be used on social media and wants to pop up in feeds and stuff, then trying to create something that is succinct and interesting and engaging in 60 seconds is probably a great range to work for. But obviously that won't work if you're running tutorial videos on how to do something. Sometimes that will take longer than 60 seconds, and that format requires different considerations.
Because the rules, like, would you say, Dawn, that generally on YouTube you can go a lot longer, or not so much?
Yeah, I think that would be true. Actually, I think a lot of our context has been going to some sort of social media or a website, whereas YouTube, it's a lot more about the relationship with the creator and the content, isn't it?
Yeah. There's another question. Got some good technical questions coming through. Someone was wondering about getting clearances signed, especially if you're interviewing an audience or members of the public.
Yeah, good thing to do.
How would you approach that?
Well, a release form is sort of the standard way to do it. You can technically also get them to say on camera they allow the client or you to do certain things with it. But yeah, a release form's pretty classic.
And there are some kind of useful templates of that available online. I think if you just search for a talent release form, various kind of online film competitions and things use them, so you can kind of use that as a base to work from. Obviously, if you're going to be putting videos together, some people will be putting music onto those videos as well. One thing to be careful of when you put music onto your videos is whether or not you have the rights to put that music on the video. There are some libraries of music you can use. There are composers you can work with, but knowing that if you put your favorite song onto your video, there is a chance that it will be removed for copyright issues, or if you're using it to make money online, it can be demonetized as well. So it's important to be really respectful to the work of other creators. If you're going to be using other people's images or music or any other art form in your video, is making sure that you have that agreement.
Yeah, I make short videos around my street art projects. Well, I've only made about 3, but I find that if I do a search for like search terms like royalty-free music, then there are actually quite big libraries of stuff that come up that you can look through. You have to, well, for me, I'm a bit fussy. I have to do a lot of searching and a lot of listening to find something that I'm happy with. But they are there, and I know that there are paid services as well where you can, if you're doing a lot of this stuff, you can, pay a subscription, and then basically that gives you license to use music from a much broader library. Yeah, I don't know.
I think that's really
good search for those. Sorry, Dawn.
Oh yeah, I was just agreeing that's a really important thing to get right. Either you're using it with permission and probably crediting it, or you're paying a little bit of money for the right to use it. There are lots of websites can start from as little as $10, so it's definitely something to get right rather than copyright music.
Oh, and someone pointed out, which is related to what we're talking about, is always credit the artists in your videos as well. So that particularly for the royalty-free music, that's often a requirement anyway, that they usually have a little blurb that tells you how you can use it and what you have to do. But definitely anyone, like if your work intersects with any other creative person's work, then it's just good practice to credit them.
So thinking about making video from a technical perspective, and things that you can do easily with your phone and stuff, what are some of the kind of key tips and tricks for if you want to get started in making a video and all you've got is your phone? What are some of the key things that you need to be thinking about?
I think there's a few key ones for me. Lighting is massive. That's really huge. A good lighting will make. Phones now are great. They can take good footage, but you want to not be shooting a subject again with the light behind them. You want the light either coming in towards them or from the face, from the side, and just thinking how harsh it is, whether it's blowing out the picture or you need to soften it a bit. So just even where you sit someone in a room is huge on how the visuals come out there. I think audio is another thing that is really key. That might be something people might want to invest in a mic or just take a lot of care on that, because something Sasha mentioned was that people forgive bad imagery to an extent, like a dodgy webcam or an older camera, but they need to be able to hear what's going on.
Definitely. One of the questions we have here is if there are any tips on free or affordable software for designing some simple drawn animations to include in your video. And knowing your background and the work that you've done, you might be the perfect person to be answering that.
You would think so, although a lot of mine is through stop mo or kind of editing it very intricately. So stop mo is a way, but there's things like Doodly that seems to keep advertising to me on Facebook, and similar things which will basically make an image appear. I guess it depends. Do you want to animate ones that you have drawn, or do you want to have like a bank that's appearing, and that will affect what you choose there.
Okay, we'll see if there's a follow-up question to that.
I've noticed that Procreate on an iPad that allows you now to do stop frame animation in terms of it does onion skinning, which means it will show your previous frame, and you can draw the new movement over the top of that. So that that is very affordable software, but you need an iPad Pro, which is not very affordable hardware. But if you do have an iPad Pro, then I think Procreate, I can't remember, but it might cost $10 or $15 or something. I haven't used
and
it
one thing
myself.
is Clip Studio Pro, which is what I use as well, has a similar kind of option. And the main thing to think about there is you've got a transparent background, and that you're exporting as a PNG, and that you can retain what they call the alpha channel, and then that can be put over an image and be transparent in between the lines.
I wonder, like, what might be quite useful for people is to maybe we should talk through like a simple process from the beginning to the end in terms of not so much the technical aspects, but in terms of how to creatively approach things. I mean, as I mentioned, I make videos, but I have a strong feeling that I probably am not using a very good process, because I'm kind of it's more just shoot a whole lot of stuff and then work out what I'm going to do with it. But I know, for example, some people use storyboarding. Some people might make lists of like their shot lists, so they make sure they get all their shots, all that sort of stuff. And then obviously you go through to the shooting and the editing, etc. Would you be happy to talk us through maybe what a simple process might be for someone to make something at home, Dawn?
For sure. I would say shooting a lot of stuff and working out what to do with it is as valid as any other, if that's what you're going in with, especially for a documentary type project. If we were, let's say, creating an animation at Nimbus, then you'd be doing a lot of listening and talking initially, and then we'd be going to them with a script, and then sort of talking through that. Then we'd be storyboarding the script, which can just be sketchy, or you could take things from the internet if you're not comfortable sketching, and getting a bit of an idea what you want it to be visually, and then looking at the shooting, voiceover, things like that. And then you're coming into post-production and editing and bringing it into the software and getting all the timings right there.
Yeah, and so when you say voiceover, that's when you might not be seeing the person talking, but you might be seeing, for example, maybe that's when you've got your time lapse of you painting, or it's got showing your dance rehearsal, whatever, but the person narrating over the top.
Absolutely, that's one of the main joys of video, really, is that you can continue to illustrate what they're talking about in interesting visual ways.
Yeah, and I guess that sort of helps create a flow as well, right? Because I know with my early videos, I would be like, okay, this is a bit with me talking, so now I'll sit in front of the camera and do my talking, and this is a bit with me painting, so now I'm doing that. But I found once I started mixing those up a bit, then it actually, I've started thinking about it more in terms of like how the sort of forward motion of the narrative, if that makes sense. So I can, like, when I'm watching things, I can often feel when the energy starts to feel a bit dead and it needs something to kind of drive it forward. So I find sometimes cutting away from the person talking and showing some stuff is a way that kind of happens.
Absolutely.
There's been a few more questions. One is any mic recommendations?
I would probably throw that back to you guys. Like, we have a lapel mic and we have a directional mic, but those aren't so much at home ones. Do you have any recommendations as audio music-y people?
There are a range of different things you can use. Lapel mics are great if you're just capturing talking. Sennheiser makes some nice ones. AKG makes some things. In terms of like distance directional mics, boom mics, Rode is a company that makes some really nice and reasonably affordable things. It really is a difficult question because it depends a little bit on your budget and a little bit on the scope of what you want to do. If you're just recording talking, or if you're recording music, or you're recording something that's really loud or something that's really quiet, those are all considerations. One thing that can be really a great thing is there's a company called Zoom who make handheld recorders. Some of them have microphones built in. Some of them you can also plug mics in, and so they record separately to the camera. So obviously you need to sync them, but the mics and things on those are really useful, and they're battery powered, so you can just kind of sit it next to the person that's talking, and go from there. Those are also useful for recording voiceovers. But yeah, it does depend a little bit on what the need is. Another question we have there: any inexpensive ways to make a green screen?
Have
you done much green?
Bulldog clips?
Paint?
Yeah, I think you can. The thing with green screens, from my very limited experience, is making sure that the surface is consistent. So you can use a green sheet or a roll of fabric, or paint on a wall, or paint on paper, or giant sheets of coloured paper, or whatever. It just needs to be flat and consistent, and have the background lit separately to the thing that you're filming. So you want to have a consistent light on the screen, and then another light on the person or object that you're filming, so that there is separation for being able to put in the background. And also you want to make sure that there's not too much kind of green light reflection on the person, because otherwise they'll have a kind of weird alien glow. So those are some of the things that can be worth considering. So lighting, as was said earlier, with any video making, is hugely important. But as you get into green screening, having physical lights that you can move and point and control the brightness of will be really vital. Where if you're doing stuff that's a little bit more informal and straight to camera, sunlight can be enough, or some nice house lighting, depending on the colour of the bulbs and the intensity of the bulbs. Another question we have is around drones, and do you use a drone, and hints on drones starting out, how much to spend, any kind of drone experience in the room?
Not for me.
We do have one, and I have flown it. I think it's really important to do sort of the boring technical bit, but to be legal with it. Like either you're in one of our spaces where you're allowed to fly a drone, or that you've gone through AirShare and logged it and gone through the right process. So that's the boring part out the way. Outside of that, I'm not really an expert. We have another team member who does our drone, because we know that it does take work to get nice drone shots and to do it safely and well and beautifully. I think though, starting small and then upgrading if you know that you love it and you're going to use it is probably a good idea.
It can take a bit of getting used to just flying them, let alone getting the video footage. Having stable flight that moves in a consistent direction. So you'll want to spend a bunch of time just working on your flying skills, and then working out your camera skills alongside that.
It is an amazing tool. Like they're great things.
I guess it depends what you. I don't know anything about drones, but I'm just thinking out loud. I guess it depends what you're wanting to put on one as well, right? Like you, I imagine a much smaller drone is all you'd need to carry a GoPro. But if you're wanting to get, a larger camera like SLR shots or something, then that's probably a much more significant drone. Is that how it works?
Yeah, the Phantoms and the Mavics have them built in, and they're good quality with different kind of aspects to each. So that's probably just reading up, watching some YouTube and seeing what might suit. Like for instance, the Mavic is very portable. It's a lighter one. Phantoms arguably a better image quality. So just sort of thinking about those kind of things too.
I find like my approach with all of the stuff, like the questions around microphones and stuff like that, is if you're willing to put in the time reading reviews, I mean, I'm a nerd, so I'm quite happy watching tech reviews on YouTube and reading reviews on Amazon or whatever. But if you're wanting to read the reviews, then you can really make sure you get stuff that's right for what your needs are. And often there's go-to brands, which is a good, safe way to go. But I can't remember the brand of the mic that I brought. I bought one to attach to my GoPro, because GoPros are pretty terrible microphones. But it was kind of a no-brand one, but the reviews were amazing on Amazon. So I was like, okay, it's worth a shot. Like, it's a fraction of the price of the Rhodes or the Sennheisers or whatever. So, if you're willing to go down the nerdy rabbit hole, then you can get some good deals and find some good gear.
Yep. I think that the other thing with microphones is that they each are designed with a different purpose, and depending on how nerdy you want to go with your audio knowledge, they have a different sound quality that will benefit certain things over other things. And so some microphones sound better on voices than they do on other things because of the frequencies that they emphasize. And also some microphones, depending on your voice, will sound better than others. So if you're going to be recording your voice a lot, so if you're doing a lot of talking to camera for vlogs, or you're a singer and you're wanting to get into using a microphone to capture that, it can be useful if you can kind of go into a music store or something that sells microphones and test them, because if you're going to use it for your own voice, then it may depend on what you want your voice to sound like as to which mics you might use. Another question we have here is easy to use video editing app. The question is directly for iPhone, but that may also be useful for desktop software as well. In terms of an iPhone, I know that the iMovie app, that is an Apple app, is really useful. It works on iPhone and iPad. It's relatively user-friendly once you kind of understand how to drag things around and slide things, and if you filmed it on your phone as well, then the video footage is all there and you don't have to import it in any other way. But there are other apps available as well, depending on kind of the scope of what you want to do with your video editing. Dawn, did you have any other kind of recommendations for apps or programs to?
For work, we're mostly in Adobe Suite, and I have to admit I don't do a whole lot on the phone. I know there's a few. iMovie is one if you're wanting to do like sort of quick things, put on a sticker or a title and put it out. I've had a little play with InShot and Splice. So I think it's really, might as well just try a few and see what works for you there. And then as far as a free, I would always lean towards bringing the footage onto a tablet or a computer, so you've got a bit more control. You can get a bit tighter on your cuts. I had a play with Filmora 9, which was actually quite impressive for a free program, and had a lot of the functionality that I would want in terms of separating audio and video and layering to quite a high degree and doing quite tight in and out points, things like that. So Filmora 9 I was quite impressed by.
Great. And Paul, anything in particular that you've been using?
I have an old version of Premiere, which is CS6, so I think there's been quite a few updates since then. But that's an Adobe product that works really well for me. I really like to edit things, not music videos, but I like to use music, and I like to have sharp cuts on the beat. It really, like, if you're doing cuts in your video making, it's really good if there's something that's kind of making sense of those cuts happening. That's not a very good way to put it, but if if you cut between shots on a beat with a soundtrack, you pretty much don't notice the cut. You can also cut on movement as well, as it can be a really good way to kind of make a cut sort of make sense within your editing. So I like that kind of level of control, and Premiere lets me have that. And saying that, you have to buy it. iMovie gets a bit trickier for that kind of precision of cutting, but it is super easy to use compared to other software, and it comes free with your Mac if you've got a Mac. I presume there's a Windows equivalent as well, but I don't know what that would be. So I don't use a Windows machine, but I presume there's a built-in one. Does anyone?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
As a film and video editor, which looked sort of similar-ish to iMovie, but I didn't go in depth into it. So it exists.
Mm.
And I think the same thing probably applies for the Android devices as well. There'll be a range of different video editing programs, but yeah, depending on what you want to do, if it's the more intricate you want to be, the more getting it onto a desktop machine and getting it into a piece of software, the more fine-tuning you can do. And if you want to be adding voiceovers and things like that, doing it on a desktop machine is infinitely easier than recording a voiceover and importing it onto your phone. There was a question for what was that program called, Paul?
So that I mentioned Premiere, which is part of the Adobe suite. My version's an old one in CS6, but and you probably can't buy that version anymore. But I don't know what the newest one is. It's all cloud-based now. And the other one that I mentioned was iMovie, which is built into your. If you've got a Mac, it's already on your computer. You might not have noticed it yet. But definitely, I agree that if you can, I wouldn't try and edit something on my phone unless maybe you're doing something like a quick thing for social media, very, very simple. But any kind of editing, I find even the screen on my laptop feels small, my 15-inch screen. So trying to edit on whatever the size of an iPhone screen is would be pretty tough, I think, for any kind of length of video. As well as the fact that your little phones are amazing, but they're not very powerful really compared to a computer. So it's a pretty demanding thing to try and do on a portable device. Yeah.
Just a note on using the phone for the filming too. I think a key thing is going to landscape. Well, depending if you want to do everything in portrait, that's fine because that might be part of your technique. But probably landscape as a default, and then keeping it still is really huge. So even if you're sort of wedging your hands in like this, or you're propping it on a fence post, having still footage will cut together much more easily than wobbly footage.
I'd just been filming some videos for my wife for a group that she's with, and needed to keep my phone still because it was being filmed on the phone. So used a mic stand with a bunch of bulldog clips to kind of use it as a tripod, which is not the most high-tech thing, but it worked. Also, previously having done some concert live streams, a bookshelf and a wine bottle and a bit of blue tack can also be quite useful for getting the angles right on holding a phone steady if you're looking for something like that.
You can buy these little like iPhone, or not just iPhone, but you buy little phone. I just got mine on Trade Me, and it just if you have your phone like this, it's got a spring-loaded thing that you just stretch around, and it holds your phone pretty much like that, and then it attaches to a tripod. And the tripod it comes with is really budget, but you can unscrew it and then attach it to. It's got a pretty standard thread on it, so you could attach it to a better tripod if you had a better one. But even on the standard one, it'll make things a lot easier. It also came with a little Bluetooth remote, which allows you to you can hit the button to start filming or to take a photo, depending on what setting you're on. So for me, like when I'm painting a mural, that's when probably the only time I've used it. It's great for, like, if there's no one else there with me, I can get photos of me painting, or I can get shot videos of me painting without having to kind of run over to the camera, hit the timer or whatever, and then run back. And, it's kind of a pain doing that. And often you miss. So, yeah, and it was super cheap. It was, I don't know, $10 or something. So that was a good bit of kit that I found for those sorts of things. And yeah, for live streams and stuff like that, it's really good as well.
I think the other thing to remember is that the front-facing camera that you'd typically use for a Zoom call or Skype call is typically poorer quality than the camera, so the camera on the back of the phone. So the more you can film with that camera, the better quality the video will look. And so that means that if you are filming yourself, having a tripod and potentially doing some tests where you press go on the camera or on the remote or whatever you're using and stand in a consistent place, if you have to mark that on the floor, and seeing kind of what the framing is like can be useful. If you've got a friend or a partner or a child or someone who can tell you whether or not you're in frame, or if you're filming other things, then the more you can kind of use that, the better the quality will be.
I realize we haven't talked a lot about content yet, and I feel like we talk about story every time we do one of these sessions. But definitely, I think the most interesting videos are the ones that have some sense of story. So when you're shooting something, think about what's going to be interesting to other people, not just you. But think about what the story is behind what you're doing. So, for example, and I'm still learning how to do this, but with my mural videos, I always talk a little bit about what I'm painting and why I'm painting it. And I think that why, like the what is kind of fine, but when you start talking about the why, it becomes much more interesting. And like if you can sort of reveal stuff about yourself or your life or your process or your ideas or that kind of stuff, that starts to get to be much more kind of compelling content than just the nuts and bolts of this is the thing that I'm making and this is how I'm making it. Do you have any tips on storytelling, Dawn?
I agree entirely. I think that's absolutely what you want to be sharing, and that is what brings it back to being authentic. The reason you're doing it and the reason you're sharing it, and what you want people to get. I mean, there's the idea of a story arc, I guess. You want to sort of draw people in, fish them in, and then take them on a bit of a journey where it might get a bit more difficult, or some more challenges, or some more about the process, and then gradually kind of reveal or complete in some way. So you're coming to a tidy or circular kind of close.
Nice.
Which often happens quite naturally, especially with a creative project, I think.
Definitely. Thinking about, there's a comment here saying, thanks for the great advice. I've been filming clips of me reading kids' stories and it's a steep learning curve. I think one thing that also brings to mind is when you're filming yourself and your practice, depending on what it is you're trying to do, is thinking about the space that you film in, what the setting is. Is it if it's your studio, that's great because it's helping people just kind of see what's going on. If it's a a project that you're working on, or it's in a theatre or something, that's also very clear. But if you're going to be doing things where you're talking to camera and capturing that sound, thinking about what room you're in will really help with that audio quality as well with the microphone. If you're in a room that's particularly reverberant or tingy, or each room has a different sound. So if you film something in a bathroom compared to a field, compared to a lounge, compared to a church, all of those rooms will sound remarkably different. And so thinking about that within the context of the story that you're telling, but also what that means for your audio clarity, can be really key. So if you're wanting something where your voice is really clear, and if you're going to be reading kids stories, typically the voice quality is quieter and calmer. Having a room that is like in acoustics they'd call it dead, a room that isn't very reverberant. It has a very kind of short reverb length, and so rooms that are filled with fabrics and different kind of soft furnishings can help to alleviate some of that sound thing. The comments just said I film in my apartment thanks to lockdown with concrete floors. If you can film on the concrete floor with a rug or a blanket on the floor, anything that will kind of interrupt some of the sound reverberation may be useful in terms of that clarity of sound quality.
I suppose even if you don't have rugs, just chucking blankets or something on the floor would help, right?
Totally. Anything that kind of interrupts the way that the sound moves around the space.
I just had an idea as well, based on Philip's question. Often when we see really nice production videos, particularly film and TV, but also a lot of YouTube videos, they're actually filmed with multiple cameras at once. They might have 2 or 3, or maybe more cameras set up, and that's why it might be cutting between all different angles. It might be like a mid shot and then a closer up shot. I try and sort of replicate that effect by just moving the camera regularly during one of my videos. So if I'm doing a time lapse, I might do a wide shot that shows the whole wall and of me painting it, and then a bit of the surrounding environment, and I'll leave that running for a while. Then I'll move it up close, and then and then maybe from the other side, and it kind of mimics that much. It's me pretending to be Flash with lots of cameras. It just creates a much more dynamic feel. People get bored of just looking from one angle with one, just the same framing. So thinking about like that, the reading of the books for kids, you could do something like film the whole thing of you sitting there, turning the pages, but then you could also go back and film the whole thing again of just the book. And you don't need to be reading again necessarily. You could just to get those close-up shots, so that you can then, if you are editing, then you could alternate between the kind of mid shot of you sitting there with the book to closer up shots that show the illustrations on the page. So yeah, just think about, and it doesn't take too much longer. It's a bit more editing, but I always think the best editing is kept simple anyway. Like, just go for straight cuts. Don't put fades everywhere. Don't put effects on. Just keep it nice and simple, and it'll look great. I'm getting the thumbs up from Dawn. Easy on the filters.
Great. I'm aware that we're kind of well over our usual discussion time, which is fine because the discussion's been interesting and I think really, really useful. Note, I've got drapes and a rug on the floor, so not too flash. That'll be perfect. Anything is helpful in terms of kind of interrupting the way that sound bounces around. But just as we kind of come to the finish, if you do have any last minute questions, quickly kind of chuck them in the comments there. But I wondered if there's any kind of closing thoughts that you have around anything in the kind of notes that you had that you wanted to really re-emphasize, or any other bit of information that may not have come up, or anything else that you wanted to leave us with, Dawn?
On the spot. I think to just have fun with it, like make a video is a creative project, even if it can be quite a dry topic. So thinking about what will make this exciting or fun to me, like that shot variation, like Paul's talking about, or thinking about what coverage you want to be happening while you're listening to something. That could be bringing in a time lapse or bringing in a little bit of homemade animation, or just thinking about how to make it interesting, what you want to say. And there's lots of advice out there if you want to look for it.
And also, you can go to Nimbus and pay them to make it for you. They do really excellent work. But consider it's actually worth considering for creative projects. That if you're going for funding or something like that, then that is a possibility is that you could apply for as one of your budget lines you could put into to get a video made for you.
Mm-hmm. But that is a really great thing to keep in mind in terms of documenting your work and your projects and your the things that you've been creating for future funding applications or for future jobs and things. Having that video that helps to tell that story of the thing that you've been working on, whether it's something that you've made yourself or whether it's something that you've commissioned a group of professionals to make, that's a really, really useful resource, and it is worth putting some kind of time and thought into how that's done, and just starting making stuff, capturing footage, setting a camera going when you're painting or when you're rehearsing or when you're kind of doing these things, because that is all kind of useful in terms of telling the story of that project and telling the story of your creativity and your work. And it's useful, it ties back into what we talked about earlier, in a previous session around social media and connecting with your audience, but it's also just a great archive of what you've been working on and how things have been working on a particular project.
Absolutely, I'd agree with that, and I think people shouldn't necessarily get put off by having to overcome the initial technical things, which are now easier than they've ever been. Really, like we can shoot HD video, we can get free video editors. We're not having to go into the Steenbeck and chop it up on with the film. But it's really accessible. It's more accessible than it's ever been, and video is a really powerful force. It's worth doing, and it's worth sharing.
And
it definitely gets really good engagement on social media, and I find a video will get it'll just get a lot more interaction. People, I can put a photo up of a wall that I've painted and write a whole lot of stuff, but people, I think, don't really read that very much. Whereas if I'm telling the story through video, I suddenly get all these comments going, "Oh, awesome message," or "That's really interesting," or whatever. So it definitely performs really well online. So,
speaking of online, I think also take the time to put on captions if that's appropriate to the work, because you want people to go, "Oh, that does sound interesting," and sort of click through onto your audio. So that's just another little tip for finishing off a video.
Awesome. Definitely. It's a great thing to be doing, and don't be too concerned about what the quality is in the first go. Just start making it, and the more you make it, the better it will get. There are really great resources online as well for if you want to do something and don't know exactly how to do it. There's probably a YouTube video of some other dude in his room in an apartment in New York or something talking you through how to do it, or there are kind of online courses through things like Skillshare and lynda.com and a few other online kind of training programs where you can access content on really practical ways of using specific software or specific cameras or specific kind of ways of thinking if you need that help as well. A huge thank you to Dawn and Nimbus Media for having you here today to share your thoughts and what you do. As always, if you have any questions or concerns or want to talk to anyone about your projects and ways to engage creatively, you can reach out to Creative Waikato. Stay well. Enjoy the move to level 2 when that starts to happen on Thursday. Be creative and have a great day.
Thanks, everyone. See you next week.
Cheers.